World of Tanks has a huge learning curve to overcome, and today's video aims to help you speed up that learning and get better and perform more consistently within your game so that you don't end up at the bottom of the team list. To do this, I have outlined the top tips and strategies to learn the game quickly and to avoid the unnecessary struggles that most players face when grinding out their games, so you can start dominating in your own games if you don't already. As such, the first step I want to discuss with you is to crush the basics within the game and make sure your understanding of what differentiates an average player to a good or even a great player. Of course, this might seem fairly straightforward in terms of being able to consistently do the basics, but it's often one of the hardest things that most people and most players find within the game, and in order to help you understand what you should focus on, we have to look at what these basics are. In simple terms, the basics come down to three main things. The first one being your own handling of a tank, and what you need to physically do in the game. Now, this encompasses knowing how to aim properly, knowing the weak spots of a lot of vehicles that you'll be coming up against, communication with teammates, and early game decision making that most people fail at. I mean, that's the reason why most people have a 48% win rate. One of the things people typically try to brush over is dedicating some time to understanding these key things, and generally if you can master these, you'll be able to straight away bypass that 48% average win rate mark and make it to above and beyond 55%. This is the kind of key, the crux to learning the game and actually understanding how you can then progress yourself and learn the rest of the things that are offered within World of Tanks. And my first recommendation is to develop the key knowledge of tanks within the game. Try to familiarise yourself with all the vehicles you will meet in the game, ranging from both low tier vehicles all the way to tier 10, as you're going to be meeting pretty much all of them. And one thing people refuse to do, and what limits them, is that when they find a vehicle that they really struggle to play against or play with, they rarely look into what that is and proactively look at how they can beat that tank or play in that specific tank, and instead whine about it to their teammates and blame them for the fact that they don't know how to play the game. So this is something you want to completely avoid. And for me personally, I hate not knowing how to pen a new tank, or if I don't understand why I can't make a tank work. So I decide to find ways of learning this, and when I next come into the same scenario, I'm well equipped to be able to deal with whatever this might be. If you struggle with coming up against certain tanks, I highly recommend you go to the tanks.gg website, which gives you effectively the effective armor of the vehicles within the game, so you understand, why am I not necessarily penning something, or if I don't understand where you can actually pen a vehicle, then you can find the weak points. It's clearly laid out. You do not have to spend a ton of time doing this, but every time you feel like you've been outclassed or outgunned, or you simply just didn't know what to do, then I highly recommend you do that, because it's going to save you so much time. It's so much more difficult to understand and learn yourself whilst playing in those maybe 10 seconds when you might come up against a vehicle, or maybe you're spending a minute playing, duking it out with a vehicle. It's not a ton of time, whereas you can find out far quicker and far more efficiently how to actually take out these vehicles if you just dedicate the time, and it will save you so much time in the long run. In fact, it will probably save you hundreds of hours of playing the game to be able to get to the same skill level as you might have done through literally just bashing your head against a brick wall. And no one wants to be rubbish for a long period of time, or no one wants to be, bang average at the game for a long period of time, or at least that's what I presume. But if you're watching this video, hopefully you are actually interested in learning, and this is something that I really do think can help out the majority of players, and it's something that limits people massively, and why maybe they find themselves at the bottom end of the game and the kind of list within every single game. So something I feel is really strong. Now, I'm not going to go as far to say that if you know where to hit every single tank in the game that you'll be able to become an amazing player, because it just simply doesn't work like that. But in order to become a good player, you have to go through that process where you find out where the weak points of vehicles are. And if you can speed it up, if you can avoid having to do that, you can spend your time doing the things that really matter to your win rate rather than, faff around for hundreds of hours figuring out how you pen something. It's super, super simple, super easy, and it is one of the key limiting factors to a lot of people's progress, and just making sure that you get to the point that you want to be at and where you feel like you're just enjoying the game. Now, in terms of actually aiming at these weak points, it can be really crucial to know you have the right settings for you and to experiment with different settings, because, you can watch a YouTube guide as to someone's idea as to what the best setting is for them, but it is not necessarily the best setting for you. So, for example, it is not where someone else feels most comfortable that's important, it's where you feel most comfortable. And people always get this wrong. Like, they think that if they, use some pro level World of Tanks players' sensitivity, that somehow they're going to improve massively, and they get caught up in that. It's not about that. One of the first things I did in World of Tanks when I started playing, it was to tone down my sniper zoom sensitivity. It's not essential, but this allows you to be more precise, and when you factor in that most tanks can only rotate their turret or gun at a set speed anyway, it's almost impossible to slow down your targeting by having lower sensitivity, and it literally just helps you zoom into where the weak points of vehicles might be, or at least be able to consistently hit them more. And so there's no real reason why you want to be flicking around with a super high sensitivity in the sniper mode. Now, does that mean you can't do that, or that you may be an exception to the rule? But in general, the lower the sensitivity, the easier it is for you to be able to consistently hit your shots on people, and to pinpoint where those positions are on the enemy team's tanks, so that you're consistently dealing damage. Because there's a ton of times where you're going to miss out on damage because maybe you had sensitivity that was too high for your own personal level of enjoyment or comfortableness. I don't even know that that's a word, but we're going with it. But yeah, essentially just make sure that you put your sensitivity to where you feel comfortable, and that's really where I did with the sniper view. And of course, in the third person view, I actually ramped up the sensitivity so I can flick around to discover where opponents might be, just to gain a bit more awareness. So highly recommend that A, you reduce your sniper zoom sensitivity, and B, you actually increase your third person zoom speed, so that you can move around and you can basically be a little bit more active in terms of understanding your surroundings. And that way you're going to save yourself maybe a few times where you get caught out by maybe having overactive sensitivity, or maybe you just didn't understand where someone was coming from, or you couldn't turn quick enough to be able to scope out where this opponent that might be to your side might be. So these are stuff that are really, really helpful, and it was definitely something that I found super useful when playing myself, and it just made a decent chunk of a difference with my own gameplay. If you are enjoying the video so far, found it somewhat useful, please feel free to check out the large amount of content that we already have on the channel. And if you actually enjoy these too, don't be afraid to subscribe and like this video, as this would greatly help spread the video to more people, and hopefully less people are spamming heat at tracks and stuff like that within the game. So fingers crossed that will be something that you guys will do. And on that note, if you have any questions, or you think you may not have understood something, feel free to actually leave it in the comment section. And if you have something that you can add to the conversation, please feel free to help people out in the comments as well. Now that we've covered some low-hanging fruit, I guess it's time to start with the real meat and potatoes of what you can do to improve past the initial stages. And everyone wants someone to just go, this is what you do on this map, this is what you have to do every single time. And it's not like that in World of Tanks. And contrary to most people's thoughts who have played World of Tanks is more of a strategy game than you think. Even if Wargaming add blatantly overpowered tanks and vehicles that ruin the best of strategies along the way, we can still learn these core strategies, and making sure that you understand these are going to be super important. And I don't mean just jump into a random battle and press W. No, you have to think about the playing the game and thinking about how you can outgame your opponents. Now, the most important piece of advice I can give you right now is that you must think outside of the box. And if you're not thinking outside of the box, you are at least doing all of the basics perfectly. And you're really trying to focus on just knuckling down and really actually getting stuck into making sure that you're making the simple decisions really correctly. Like, you know, you could try and do all of these complex maneuvers in the game, but at the end of the day, these are things you master after you've mastered the basics. If you haven't mastered the basics, as everyone always says, don't try and run before you can walk. Make sure that you can walk very well and that you're not hobbling around or falling over all the time. So yeah, it's really important that you master these basics, and this is what is going to make you reach the 60% win rate mark. It is basically your consistency of doing the basics right and adding in the extra stuff that you can learn along the way. Now, the one thing I consistently did wrong at the beginning, as I'm sure you probably have too, you might not now, but we all know about when people used to follow the highest tier tank in the game because they must know what they're doing. You know, the highest tier tank that you've seen in the game, a random player, must know what they're doing. But throw that out the window if you're still using that, or if you are kind of just following what typical teams do. Remember that the average win rate is 48%, and so you don't want to be one of those boys. So consistently remind yourself you need to evaluate the scenario at every single opportunity. And, you know, for example, you can, you know, choose to try and run away, which you see maybe a ton of tanks coming towards you. You're thinking, I'm just going to try and run and maybe I'll be able to get away, but often you actually get taken out in trying to run away, and you'd have been far more influential in your own game even if you got taken out by standing and fighting, or making it super difficult for people to take you out. For example, even if you do absolutely no more damage within the game other than make it more difficult for opponents to take you out, you're going to be able to quite simply prolong the fight on one of the flanks. Maybe they have to kind of YOLO into you, maybe they're going to lose a ton of health to be able to do it, and that way, you know, you're going to increase your chances of winning, and you don't even have to do anything other than not throw yourself away trying to run away when you probably already know that you're going to get taken out anyway. So make it difficult for your opponents, and that is just one like simple scenario that, you know, most people forget about and they just blindly just do something within the game. So always think, what is the best scenario for me? Am I going to be able to get more damage from running away and then ending up, you know, getting sausage sandwiched between both flanks, and then you end up just getting taken out straight away? Or maybe you need to move far earlier on in the gameplay where maybe you stayed way too long to the point where that was no longer an option to do. So, you know, think of these things well in advance, and that is really what the top players will do to be able to avoid that sort of thing. On a similar note, you should always take note of positions that you find catch you out, and this is probably one of the best things that I've used personally, is that, you know, there's so many times where you think, oh, what the hell, man, this guy's like absolutely farming me, and you think, this position he's in, it's outstanding, there's no way that I will ever be able to use a position like that. And remember, you can use the position in the next game that you play in. Now, you might find yourself in a terrible one, and you should also note that down, but it's far harder to realise that you're in a bad position, or even realise that you're in a fantastic position. So it's far easier to take the low-hanging fruit in the terms of being like, oh, well, this guy's using a brilliant position. When I was in this position, the enemy was far more superior. So in another game where maybe I see an opponent where I am right now, well, maybe I'll use that position to counter them. And once you start learning these things that are like super simple, you know, it's not hard to realize like, oh, I'm getting farmed from this position, it's probably a good position if someone goes in this area. Next time, if I ever see that happen, I'm going to do the same. And if you build up, you know, 10, 20, 30 different spots within the game, then you're going to be able to use those. The more knowledge of these spots that you have, the easier it's going to be to make your decision making, because there's so many things where you're like, when you first start, that you're like, where do I even start? I have no idea where any of the good positions are. I can look on YouTube and there might be one or two, and they are usually very, very novel positions that are like very unusual, and that's what makes them interesting. But a lot of the time the kind of key positions are quite hard to find, so you want to make sure that you just start building up your own repertoire, and even in just doing that you're going to be able to grow your gameplay and your experience much faster. And this is one of the key kind of things that you need to do within the game if you are thinking about getting better. And of course, the mini-map can be your best friend. I recommend everyone spends a whole lot of time within each of their games understanding the mini-map and how the team is deploying, as this can save you a world of pain. Like the amount of times where at the beginning I'm thinking, well, this position worked really, really well, and I had no like kind of thought about, you know what, oh, well, there's 14 teammates and they've all gone in the opposite direction to where I'm going, but this position I'm going in is the best position for my tank. It is where heavy tanks should go, or it is where light tanks, all of the light tanks on my team should be going, but I'm going to be the one that's going to put up the valiant fight and find yourself against 14 of the opponent's tanks and realise that a 1 versus 14 is not a good scenario whatsoever, and then you get taken out within the first 3 seconds of being spotted because there's 14 tanks shooting you, and then you get in the chat, my team is terrible, why didn't you do this? Well, the first thing you should have done is realised, well, you knew that your team were going all in one direction, and if the best chance of you winning is to go with them, then yes, you should be going with them, or you should support them, even if they're making a terrible decision for their specific tank. If it means that you're going to get taken out because you tried to put up a valiant, righteous kind of fight, then of course it wasn't worth it for you, and there's no one's going to give you a medal at the end of it for YOLOing on one singular flank against 14 of the opponents. That's a terrible decision, and of course a lot of people fall victim to this when they start to become more knowledgeable about the game and think that their knowledge is going to carry them through the game, and actually it's the decision making and your experience that will carry you through the game, because there's only so much of learning the weak points that you can do. Once you've done it, you cannot get better from learning more weak points. There is only a set amount of weak points in the game, and it then becomes the ideas behind how you can move forward, how you can strategize, how you can adapt to the scenario, and it's the adaptation that makes the 60% win rate players, the 65% win rate players, and it's this adaptability and knowledge of the game. It's very rarely the tank that you're playing, because, you know, the whole thing about, well, if you just play an Object 279E and you're a good player, you're going to be able to have a 70% win rate or something ridiculous, when in reality, you know, you can put a terrible player in a brilliant tank and they'll do terrible, and you can put a amazing player in an awful tank and they will still do equally better than everyone else on the team. So clearly the tank is not necessarily everything within World of Tanks. It can help, but it's not something you should be focusing on if you're actually trying to learn the game. So these small tips, these kind of overviews, there's no one thing. I can't just sit here and go, you know what, this is the one thing that you need to do in World of Tanks. If you do this, this is going to make you a 60% win rate player, because it's not going to happen. You do have to actually play the game, but the ideas and knowing what to be thinking about is what is going to make you grow as fast as possible. Learn as much, get as much experience going out and actually proactively finding things out for yourself, so that you don't have to play in that same scenario where you lose for like 50 games because you didn't know what to do, and actually just going out and researching it for 5 minutes, so you don't, so in the other 49 games that you play in, you're going to be able to consecutively beat that scenario for the future. So there's loads of different things. This is a video that is primarily focused at just trying to improve the way in which you tackle your problems within World of Tanks. There are a ton of them, but yeah, hopefully you did enjoy, and it's this reason why I actually made the channel, and hopefully in future videos I can teach you some more specific spots on maps, where the influential positions are, how you can guarantee yourself more wins, and every time you log on to the game. And hopefully this video has given you an initial glance and some tips that you should implement into your own game. Of course, if you're a far better player than me, then feel free to let others know maybe some better tips or some more specific tips that you think are really crucial, or if I've missed anything, leave them in the comment section down below. Or if you completely disagree with everything I've said, also leave it in the comment section down below. But once again, if you did enjoy this, please don't hesitate to have a look at the guide series that we've got on the channel. I'll leave a link on screen right now which showcases the playlist, so you'll be able to actually have a look through. There's a light tank guide, there's gameplay of how heavy tanks can be played, as well as general overviews as to specific areas on maps, as well as showcasing some of the best players in the game's replays, and hopefully that will give you an indication as to how you can improve and maybe even replicate some of the games that you're seeing from these. And of course, I hope today's videos helped you stop batting your head against the wall as much as you probably do at the moment when playing World of Tanks, as everyone does who plays World of Tanks. But thank you, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.